I'm Patricia, and this is Investigating Vegan Life with Patricia Kathleen. This series features interviews and conversations I conduct with experts from food and fashion to tech and agriculture, from medicine and science to health and humanitarian arenas. Our inquiry is an effort to examine the variety of industries and lifestyle tenets in the world of vegan life. To that end, we will cover topics that have revealed themselves as common and integral when exploring veganism. The dialogue captured here is part of our ongoing effort to host transparent and honest rhetoric for those of you who, like myself, find great value in hearing the expertise and opinions of individuals who have dedicated their work and lives to their ideals. You can find information about myself and my podcast at patriciakathleen.com. Welcome to Investigating Vegan Life. Now let's start the conversation. Hi everyone, and welcome back. I'm your host, Patricia, and today I'm sitting down with Isabelle Steichen. She's the founder, certified plant-based nutritionist, and podcaster. You can find out more about the information we talk about today on her company on getlupii.com. That is getlupii.com. Welcome, Isabelle.
Hey, so nice to be here. I'm excited. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm excited to talk to you as well. I like your company. We talked off the record briefly about it, the website presence and everything else. I think it's really cool what you're doing with it. And for everyone listening, I will read a quick bio on Isabelle. But before I do that, a roadmap of today's podcast, in case you would like to forecast the trajectory of our rhetoric. We'll first be looking at Isabelle's academic and professional background and personal plant-based journey leading up to launching her company. And then we will directly turn into unpacking Lupii. And it's a plant-based protein for planet-based people. The company itself has products. We'll unpack that. We'll also get into the logistics of the who, what, when, where, how, and why for all of you nerdy entrepreneurs and founders out there that care about those back-end deals. And then we will also look at the ethos of the company and the impetus for launching it. And within that, we'll look at rhetoric regarding the responsibility, environmentally stable questions, as well as questions regarding the pandemic of COVID-19 and how those interplay with a lot of the ethos around companies like this. And then we'll wrap everything up with goals that the company and Isabelle herself is looking to towards for the next 1 to 3 years. As promised, a quick bio on Isabelle before I start peppering her with questions. Isabelle Steichen grew up in Luxembourg and moved from Europe to the US in 2013. She also transitioned to a plant-based diet the same year, and her decision was driven by ethical, environmental, and health reasons. Since moving to New York City, Isabelle worked closely with founding teams for various early-stage VC-backed startups in the food and tech space. Her first role was at Kitchen Surfing, an on-demand chef service startup where she launched the business in new markets and scaled the on-demand chef team. Most recently, Isabelle ran the operations and customer service team at Sawyer, a Brooklyn-based education software company. As a longtime passionate vegan certified in plant-based nutrition from e-Cornell, as well as the founder of the Plantiful Podcast, she is now combining her startup background with her desire to spread plant-based eating with her new business, Lupii. Lupii is here to help people live plantful lives through their power of the small but mighty lupini bean, which is not only good for humans, but also for Mama Nature. So, and again, the website is getlupii.com. So, Isabelle, before we launch into Get Lupii, I'm hoping that you can kind of draw us an academic background and early professional life, as well as like your plant-based journey and how that all kind of led you into launching Get Lupii.
Yeah, totally. So as you mentioned earlier, I actually grew up in Luxembourg, which is a small little country in Europe, and went to elementary and high school there. And then I moved to France to go and get an undergrad degree. And then also I went to grad school in France. So I studied political science and econ during undergrad, and actually did a study abroad year in the United States during undergrad. I went to Hamilton College, which is a small liberal arts school, upstate New York. So I got kind of a feel for this States and for American education while I was there. And then I decided to go back to Paris and pursue a master's degree in urban planning. And so urban planning is like all about city design and thinking about how people behave and live in urban spaces, and knowing that, you know, the world is moving towards more urbanization. That was something that I was always really interested in and passionate about, and thinking about cities from a holistic perspective. And so that's what I went to school for. And then I ended up moving to the States in 2013. So right when I finished grad school, that was motivated by the fact that I had met my husband during undergrad when I studied abroad at Hamilton. I met him. He's American. He went to school here. We started dating. Then we did long distance for a while. And then I had studied urban planning and had actually specialized on North American cities. So it felt like moving to New York was a great way for me to bring or kind of start my professional career, but also be with the person who I love. And so ended up moving here, and I worked in urban planning for about a year. So I worked for a nonprofit that was managing one of the neighborhoods around Bryant Park, as well as the park itself. And I really loved the team there, and I loved the mission, but I felt that I wanted something very different. And I had a few friends that were working for startups. And so I started getting really curious about that. You know, the education space in Europe is different, but also the professional space when it comes to startups, innovation, it's just very different. I think it's very much based on how kids are raised in Europe. And I think there's just maybe different incentives around innovation. But it's just not as developed as it is in the States. And so I was very intrigued by that. And I ended up getting my first job at an early stage tech food startup called Kitchen Surfing, as you mentioned in the bio. It was, the service changed the business model. I mean, it changed the business model a few times, but it was in a nutshell like an on-demand chef service. So we were basically deploying chefs on a weekly night and sending them to people's homes and having them cook meals there within like 30-40 minutes, and then move on to the next person's home. So it was this really interesting tech-enabled food startup that was very specific to the New York City market, actually, because nowhere else, I think, in the world is there a need for like this like rapid service that exists in New York. So I was there for a while and helped to scale the team and expand the business into new markets. And really, I would say I caught the startup bug there because I really loved being part of the early stage team. I loved how I saw that anything and everything I was doing had a direct impact on the outcome of the business and the trajectory of the business. And I was employee, I think, number 7 or 8 there. And so I saw the team grow and double and triple in size and move from like a townhouse in Gowan, Brooklyn, which is very far from Manhattan, to a fancy office in Soho. And so really saw the company go through very different stages. And that really made me so much more excited even about being part of a startup and just seeing the direct impact of your work on an everyday basis like that. And so I ended up spending my career the last few years for various different startups, mostly actually in the tech space. And most recently I was with Sawyer, which is an amazing online platform and software company for education businesses. And I learned a ton about product development and tech and coding and things like that I never thought I would ever be exposed to. And so I think that would be the second piece that I love about startups is that, you get hired for a specific role, but really you do a lot of different things and you grow into different roles throughout the lifespan of the company and really evolve and learn new skills. And that's something that I truly appreciate. I like the fact that, you can really acquire very new skill sets when you're exposed to things that, just come up like they do in a startup where you have to be nimble and adapt and have a growth mindset. And so, so that's a little bit about my professional background in a nutshell. And then you asked about my plant-based journey, and I think it's very much linked to my whole trajectory, especially since I moved to the States. I decided to go vegan when I moved here, and it wasn't coincidental in the sense that I had been playing with the thought of totally cutting out animal products for a while, but I grew up in I want to say, very traditional European family. You know, I have a French grandmother, and cheese was like an essential part of our culture. And so were a lot of meat dishes, but I personally always struggled with the concept of eating animals and why we were making a distinction between the animals that we loved, like our dogs and cats, and the animals that end up on our plate. And so I always wanted to be vegetarian or vegan, but growing up with my family, that just was not an option. And then when I moved out from home, moved to France for undergrad and grad school, I pretty much was vegetarian because I was cooking for myself. And then I started just getting more and more into researching, you know, the sustainability aspects and the economic aspects of animal agriculture, and realized that especially in the States, it's you know, it's at a scale that is just very hard in terms of animal ethics. And so I put all of that together, and I decided to go vegan when I moved to New York, because I felt culturally more free to express that part of my identity in a city that is so diverse and so open-minded, where so many people follow different diets. There was no judgment associated to me eating plant-based or being vegan. And so took that leap, and then I really went on a journey, I want to say, because I started learning more and more about it. And I started this podcast as like a side project to my full-time job. And my husband, who, you know, grew up on a very traditional American diet, ended up going vegan a few years ago, totally kind of motivated by himself, coming to it more from the health angle. And so I ended up doing a plant-based nutrition certification to learn more about plant-based eating and health. And put all of that together, I realized that, you know, one of the things that I want to do is help people, empower them to make more mindful choices when it comes to their food, mindful choices for themselves, for their health, but also for the environment and the sustainability of our planet. And so it all kind of came together and culminated with me launching Lupii, because I was able to bring, you know, my startup background and early stage company background, and combine that with this deep passion that I have for the plant-based space.
Yeah. Well, so herein lies, I always wait for my guests to drop it first. I try to see how long I can go, but you did intermix the two terms. You said that, you know, you became vegan, and I always use the term plant-based, particularly with people who have companies such as yourself, because that seems to be the chosen term. But before we get into any more dialogue about how the two of us see or don't see the term similarly, how do you define vegan and how do you define plant-based?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would call Lupii a plant-based company, because we are making foods out of plants, and we are not here to prescribe any ethical convictions on people. I do think that veganism has an ethical connotation, and I would refer to myself as being an ethical vegan, in the sense that I'm trying to avoid animal-based products in all areas of my life. So I don't wear leather or wool, and I don't eat any animal products. And that's very important to me on a personal level. But that, I feel, is very much a personal choice. And what we do with Lupii is help people who are trying to eat more plants include more plants in a sustainable way into their diets. And so I think that's where I see the distinction. I see that there is an ethical connotation of veganism and a more health connotation of plant-based eating. I'm both, right? I'm a plant-based eater. I care about it for health perspectives, but I also, or from a health perspective, but I'm also vegan. I want to add here that these terms and terminology can be problematic at times because it seems very binary. It seems like, you know, my co-founder, Ali, always talks about that, how she's like, I actually don't want a label because I find it limiting in a sense. And I think she's very right about that, because I think you need to think about this as a spectrum and not as a binary choice. And so I think what turns a lot of people off is when you hear vegan and you think you have to be like militant or do everything in a prescribed way. And I just don't think that that is what veganism should be about, or what
Right.
plant-based eating should be about.
Yeah. And likewise, on the other end of that pendulum is people who feel comforted by the umbrella. Plant-based has become one of the top 10 key marketing terms for every industry, like fortified with vitamin D was in the 80s, and so people are saying things are plant-based on their label if it has any kind of a vegetable in it. And it could be
Right.
a product that is strictly not vegan. And
Right.
worse, it could have preservatives. It's starting to become this very wishy-washy, untrustworthy term. And so I think it's cool for me because I love the opportunity to make people redefine themselves and to look into how people are defining their terms. And it's causing a lot of questions to come out. And I didn't, having one term to describe 16 things is really complicated. So having vegan, plant-based, and 50 more doesn't bug me, but not having people question or define themselves, I think is where a lot of the inconsistencies are coming from. So I'm glad that you did. And since you used Lupii as an example, let's kind of climb into what it is. You and I talked about my first observations when I hit your website. I was, immediately presented with iconography and we used to call it art back in the day, but pictures and photographs that for me had this kind of throwback feel to the 70s. You have a great deal of representation of different ethnic groups and generations and things like that. And it's all based around this product that you have. So can you start off by telling us what the products are that you create, and then we'll get into the logistics of the company.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So Lupii is here to help people live plentiful lives. So whatever that means for you, no matter if you're trying to be 100% plant-based or if you're just dabbling, we want to be here for you, and we want to be inclusive in that way. And so I think when you point out how the website speaks to you, from this inclusiveness perspective, I think that's something that we feel really strongly about, is that we don't want to alienate people, and we want to meet people where they are. We launched Lupii in January, so we are still a baby company, and we launched with our first suite of products, which are the Lupii Bites. And so Lupii Bites are these little square bars that come in 3 different flavors currently. Tahini lemon cranberry, peanut butter cacao nib, and almond butter cinnamon raisin are the 3 current flavors. And that's the first product of hopefully many. So how we see Lupii is we see it as a platform for this incredible ingredient called the lupini bean, which is kind of underrated and undiscovered here in the United States. So it's an ingredient that is originally from Europe, from the Mediterranean region, Italy and Greece, has been consuming lupini beans for, I want to say, centuries. But it's something that I had been researching and thinking a lot about how does nobody in the States know about this bean that happens to be the bean with the highest concentration of plant-based protein, when I know that a lot of consumers are struggling with nutrition and specifically with protein when it comes to eating plant-based. And so we are here to hero this ingredient and build a platform for it through Lupii and through what we're doing.
That's very cool. So when you went into product development, seems tricky. It seems like a completely different beast when it comes to, vegan worlds and things like that. How long did it take you guys to source everything that you needed to from a manufacturer and distributing and things of that nature? Are you brick and mortar, everyone, it hasn't really been a hot topic for over the past couple of months due to reasons of the pandemic. But are you in brick and mortar stores, or did you start with a completely virtual presence?
Yeah, these are all great questions. So starting with your last question first, our initial launch strategy was only focused on physical distribution. So we were in about 40 accounts in the New York City area, mostly independent health stores and independent grocery stores. And then we were selling directly to office spaces as well as yoga studios and gyms. And so a lot of that has been obviously put on hold due to what's going on in the world. And so we had to quickly shift gears and focus on our online distribution. And we always had the website, we always had an online store. It just wasn't our focus, as it is a very distinct channel. And so we just, took our playbook and threw it out the window and created a new one. And focused on that. And so we are now available mostly through the website, and then we sell on some other online platforms like Amazon and Bubble and some other online retailers. In terms of your question of how long does this all take? So I want to maybe put it together in like the different steps and pieces. So I had been really fascinated by this ingredient, and I really mean that. Like reading everything and talking to everyone who knew anything about it, both people in the States as well as abroad, for a few years now. And I had been playing around with it in my kitchen and making different variations of recipes. And Lupii bites originally was actually round, and it were these little round balls that I made in all types of different flavors. And I did sell them for a split second at a store, at like a vegan cheese store and vegan specialty store in Brooklyn down the street from me, just to kind of test, like, was there a market, was there interest? And it all kind of came together in fall of 2018, where I decided to leave my last full-time job. And through various kind of opportunities, I was connected with a startup studio in Manhattan called Human Ventures, and they like to invest into entrepreneurs and businesses that have a positive impact on humans, on the planet, on the environment. And so I reconnected with the founder, Heather, and clearly I saw that there was an opportunity for us to work together. And so I basically started working with them. And kind of took this idea that was Lupii before it was Lupii, and did a bunch of market research and made everything a little bit tighter. And then realized that if I wanted to launch a food business, I needed to get some expertise from the food world and food space. And so luckily, I was introduced to Ali, who's today my co-founder, through a common connection. We both, I remember when we grabbed coffee for the first time on a Saturday morning, we were both like not really thinking much of it. And when we met, it was kind of like love at first sight. We share a passion for plant-based eating. We're both plant-based eaters, and she was ready to leave her job and jump into this with me. And her background is in traditional CPG. She's worked for Pepsi and for a few other bigger companies in the more corporate space, and has been mostly focused on branding and marketing. And so my ops experience in startups and her experience in branding and marketing was a great combination. So we got together, and that's when we really started fine-tuning the recipe and scaling it from my home kitchen to a commercial kitchen to then a co-packer. And that's when we started building out the brand and the supply chain. And so we did that over the last year. We officially started working together in May of last year. And so for 6 months, we were just heads down, focused on all of these moving pieces. And then we ended up launching on January 1st of this year.
Fantastic. Congratulations. Did you guys take funding, or was it bootstrapped?
Yeah, we did take some pre-seed funding from Human Ventures, the startup studio that I mentioned. They were super excited about the idea, so they invested. But we are a scrappy early stage startup. It's just Ali, myself, and then we have a really amazing person on the team, Megan, who is doing all of our social and so much more. And we're getting some help with fulfillment, but that's basically it. We're still a really small team and trying to be really, really scrappy.
Absolutely. I'm wondering, especially with startups, it feels like because of the scrappiness that you're talking about, this kind of alley cat mentality, a lot of people have, I find that younger the company, the more apt and prone they are to addressing, a conversation or a dialogue between their company or their product and customers regarding COVID. And in particular, plant-based vegan companies have this very delicate but important narrative with that, because the analysis, regardless of where you stand on the history of the epidemic or the pandemic or any of that, which this podcast does not endeavor to look into, what it has done for the majority of civilization is cause people to reanalyze food sources and health, and really look at what health is in this latter day and what it means to someone. And your company being this company based on this very healthful product, the lupini bean. And I'm wondering if you have had a chance to, you and your co-founder, Ali, if you guys have spoken about messaging that for your customer moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think health is an essential part of what we are trying to do with Lupii. What makes us different is not only that we're using lupini beans, which are these incredibly powerful, nutritious little beans, but also the fact that we're using the whole bean in our bar. There is no other protein bar out there that's using the whole bean. And why is that important? Because you get all the fiber. So you don't get, something super processed that is stripped of nutrition. You get the real whole ingredients. And there has been a trend over the last few years, and I'd say a trend, but really it's a movement towards eating more real and whole food. And that's really what we're standing for. So all of our bars contain 5 or 6 ingredients. You can identify all of them. They are simple. They are, straightforward. There's nothing hidden in it. And so I think that that's really essential. And we have found that our consumers really truly resonate with the fact that it's a wholesome product and it's made out of whole real ingredients. In a way, it's something you could make in your kitchen at home. And I think that's one of the value props. When it comes to, the pandemic, I think what's interesting this time around is that, people are suffering, obviously, economically and financially, not only from a health perspective, but it's very different than what happened, for example, in 2008, I think, where, there was a big economic impact on people's lives, and people will stop spending money on certain things in those times. What we've seen here is there's actually been a focus of consumers of spending money on healthy, real, wholesome products. And it's almost like people are rewarding themselves and they are investing into their health. And I think it's one, because we are in 2020 and there has been a shift, like I said, in terms of people's mindset around eating better, real, wholesome food, and realizing it can be delicious and convenient and still really good for you. But also this pandemic, it is health related. It is all about how can you protect yourself as much as possible from the impact. And I think investing into your health, eating good food, taking care of your sleep and your stress levels is something that you can do and you have control over. And I think consumers are really resonating with that and understanding that.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that end, I'm wondering, have you guys looked down the road in your goal making? Have you thought about future products or future flavors on the product? Was any of that ever written into like the beginning plans of what you're doing? And if so, can you enumerate on what they are?
Yeah, totally. So yes, that we have a lot of ideas, a lot of thoughts, and a lot of things in the making. Obviously, we are a startup, so we're always changing things and adapting to the environment. We're definitely thinking about a few new flavors in the future. So that's definitely in the pipeline. We have been talking and thinking about other products, and I think that will be very much driven by what our consumers want, because we want to co-create this company and Lupii and the products with our consumers. But the cool thing is lupini beans are very versatile and they can be adapted and used in different applications. So there's definitely a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah, it's an exciting time for you guys. And as things, hopefully as a cure comes forward from the pandemic, or an immunization at the very least, we can return and, we can start looking forward to new products from you guys. That's going to be exciting. Isabelle, we are out of time, but I want to say thank you so much for speaking with us about your company and all of your vegan knowledge. I really do appreciate it, and I appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really awesome talking to you.
Absolutely. For everyone listening, we've been speaking with Isabelle Steichen. She's founder, certified plant-based nutritionist, and podcaster. You can find out more about her and her company on getlupii.com. Thank you for giving us your time today. Until we speak again next time, remember to eat clean and responsibly, stay in love with the world, and always bet on yourself. Sláinte.